Hello. Not a good start for today, or actually not a good start for yesterday. Yesterday I was riding to work and I stopped to get some fuel, and I noticed that the left side of my scoot's back tire was wet. So okay, roads are almost completely dry, there weren't any puddles on the way, so I took a closer look. It was oil. So there's a leak somewhere, although it's probably a ruptured line, because it only leaks when the engine's on. But still, it was like, Well, the good part is that it's almost time for fall maintenance before winter, so I decided to let pros to take a look at it. But the bad thing is that that scoot is my only means to get to work. So until it's fixed, I can't go to work, and there is no financial safety net for me for this kind of situations, because I'm not a regular employee, if that's the right word. I'll go in when needed, when called. So it's kind of not again. But c'est la vie, mofus. But the good thing is that I actually managed to find that Ibanez trash metal I was talking about, and the way I found it was one of those please kick me in the ass moments. I was sitting at my desk trying to figure out how to play along rhythm tracks without using a computer, and earlier I had a Boss 8-track recorder that had a built-in drum machine, but that 8-tracker is kinda dead. Well, it still works, but since it was built back then for home use, and it was relatively cheap, the building quality isn't the best around. So the problem is that the buttons on it, there are no switches between buttons and the actual circuit board. So when I'm pressing down a button, I'm actually pressing down the circuit board. If you know anything about electronics, you probably understand what I mean. So it has worn out. So the buttons work sometimes. Sometimes they don't. Same applies to a power switch. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I can't really use that. And I was just sitting around, just looking around, then all of a sudden I saw a panel of knobs, and that was the please kick me in the ass moment. I was looking at the control panel of a Roland Microcube Bass RX. I had completely forgotten that I even own it. It's been sitting on a shelf right next to me for years, speakers down, because previously I was using only the line out from it, so I didn't need it to speakers. So in order to save room, I put it on its face. So I only saw the panel, the control panel that was on top of it. And I had completely forgotten the whole thing. It's one of those things, you know, when there's an object and you don't move it, you don't touch it, it's just there. You stop seeing it, even though it's right next to you, but you can't see it, quotes. So I took it out from the shelf and cleaned it, and there's a built-in rhythm machine. It's not a drum machine. Well, it is a drum machine, but you can't program it. You can only set style and tempo, but it's good enough for me because I hate playing to a metronome, as I've said earlier. That tick tock 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 tick tock tock has annoyed me since I first started, or when I was forced to start playing with rhythm tracks, not with actual drummers, but with rhythm tracks, what comes to, for example, recording home demos or something like that. So I've always programmed some kind of a drum track, even if it's just boom, back, boom, back, boom, back, because I can't stand that clicking. So there is a way for me to play with rhythm tracks without using a computer, and the good thing is, since I've forgotten that I own that thing, I also have a way to play bass without headphones. because that thing is it's a stereo amp that has two 2.5 watt amps in it, if I've understood correctly. So it's a stereo amp with four small speakers, and it's not too loud either. And I've used it with a guitar previously, and it also works for that. So I have an amp that I can use without blowing anyone's ears out. Here's the panel I was staring at earlier. So this is a small Roland amp. Let's just take this out of the way. Shut up. Give me some slack, will ya? So there we go. And just for a size comparison, this is a matchbox, just a regular sized matchbox. So you can see this thing is not all that big, but being 2.5 watts, this is loud as heck. I mean, I have the master volume there, and it's already pretty loud. And I've actually done some shows with this, because there's a line out in the back panel. Let's see here. Here we go. So there's a auxiliary in, both mono and in stereo, record out and headphone jack, and then there's also a foot switch that you can use for the built-in drum machine that this thing has, which I've forgotten. So where is it? And you can set the tempo. Here there is a focus or don't. There's metronome, two different kinds of rock, blues, country, R&B, ballad, jazz, funk, Latin and dance, and there are two different variations for each rhythm. And you can tap in tempo. You have your equalizers, bass, middle, treble, effects, so chorus and flanger. Then you have delay, reverb, and you also have wah, auto wah for bass. And this is something, and then you have different amp versions. There's octave bass, super flat, flip top, B-man, which is a Fender Bassman clone, bass 360 session concert, and if you want to use this thing with a microphone, I assume you also have this. And then you have built-in compressor without any adjustment. It's just a compressor. Push this down and it compresses, and then you have a tuner, and you can choose the string from here. What string are you tuning? And this also works. The tuner and the speakers also work with 5-string bass pretty nicely. So this is not big, but I completely forgot that I actually even own this thing, which was kind of a yay. But this is my savior right now, because this is the only thing that's, let's say, quiet enough but still loud enough for me to play without headphones. And they also make these things as guitar versions, obviously. Or the guitar versions, I think, are more well known than these bass versions. But if you need a small practice amp for guitar, I highly recommend you to check out the Microcube line. These are not studio amps, they're not meant to be studio amps, but buy this instead of anything from Line 6 Spider series, and you'll thank me later. Not because Spider amps are bad or Line 6 Spiders are bad, but my own personal experience with them is the same than what I have with Crate combos or combo amps made by Crate. It's not the amp, it's the speaker. I mean, well, they fixed it in the newer line of Spider amps. But with Crates, have you ever played through a Crate combo amp? Then you know that with those amps you don't need a Boss Heavy Metal in order to summon the mighty bee god or goddess at this point, queen at this point. Great amps are good, combo amps, and I remember a few guys, when I was a teenager, a few guys had them. And they were the ultimate black metal amps. I mean, they sounded terrible. But it wasn't the amp's fault, it was the speaker. I don't know what kind of speakers they put it into those things back then. But they sounded horrible. And then when some guys swapped out the original speaker, it was like a brand new amp. It sounded actually good. But I should check sometimes what speakers were used in great amps in the early to mid 90s, because I really would like to know how did they ever tested their own products, because they really were terrible. And if you have played or if you have heard one of those amps, you know what I'm talking about. What terrible. But what comes to Line 6s, and I'm Glenn Fricker, Spectra Sound Studios is on a crusade against the Spider amps, not because he hates them, but because he thinks that those things are not good for certain things. And well, he has a point in what he's saying, but the thing is that he's treating Spiders like they would as a studio amps. Spiders are not studio amps. Neither is this small cube amp. This is not a studio amp, this is a practice amp. It's a student amp. Same thing with Spider amps, small Spiders. Studio amp, student amps, practice amps. And my personal favorite, what comes to these small amps, is actually the micro cube version of a guitar amp. I've played with them and I really like them, although I don't own one personally, but I really do like them. They're simple, and that's basically all you need in that one box. With Spiders, since they have digital effects processors, it can get a pretty overwhelming. I don't say that it gets, but it can get a bit overwhelming because there's too much stuff. But with these microcubes, there are only basic effects. You can test them out and see what you like. For example, if you're in the future thinking about buying pedals, well, with something like this, you can hear what chorus does, what delay does, what the flanger does. So you know what you probably want to buy when it's time to buy your first pedals. So, and obviously same thing applies to Spiders if you like them, but that's just a matter of personal preference, I think. Previous clips were recorded in the AM hours of the day. It's now, I think, a bit after 8 p.m. I just returned some bottles to the shop, and if you or one of your family members or someone you know well enough has ADHD, you know what I mean when I say that this has been one of those days. I mean, laying down, not good. Sitting up, not good. Doing something, not good. Not doing something, not good. So this is one of those days when things just feel emotionally and mentally wrong. And well, nothing new, but still, it's always a downer. And I don't have a medication since, well, first of all, I'm over 25, so it would be expensive as heck, or too expensive for me. But the most important reason, or number one reason, is that I tried ADHD medication when I was in my mid to late 20s. And I think I took them for something like almost 4 years, I think. And my verdict was that I'd rather be hyperactive than numb, because that's what they made me feel like. So, not a fan. Those things would help a lot of things. But if you know someone who has a strong, well, I would like to say mental medication, but because I don't remember the English term for it, but is having mental issues and they have medication for that. Those people, I mean, a lot of times say that it's not fun when there are no ups and downs. So that's kind of a part of my reasonings. So what I've done today is just played some bass with the amp, read some books, or tried to read, and the entire day I've had my earphones on and I've been listening to old school black metal and doom. And why, you may ask? Well, simple reason is that you are probably familiar with the phenomenon that when someone's sad, they're listening happy music in order to feel better. Well, in my case, when I'm feeling down, I like to embrace it. So when you're kind of restless inside, I want to amplify that feeling in order to cope with it better. That's just my way. It may feel a bit whacked, but that's how I roll. And I don't usually even like black metal because of the vocal style. Although during the last few years I've started to appreciate it because, well, I've always known, as long as I've known something about black metal things, or extreme metal, let's put it this way, I've known that it takes some people say that it takes no effort to sing in a black metal or in a death metal band. You just scream or you just growl. Well, there's a technique to it, and you have to know what you're doing if you want to continue doing it. So it takes effort to do the actual good sounding black metal vocals without blowing your throat. So, and there are bands that I like, although I don't like the modern black metal. I like the early 90s stuff better. So really old school. Just take a cassette player, put it in the middle of a band practice, press record, and there you have a demo, or an album in some cases, or a bunch of guys in their rehearsal space with a 4-track cassette recorder and all the stuff. I like that sound because I've always been a fan of do-it-yourself mentality, and there are quite a lot of people all over the world doing things. And now when we have self-releasing sites like SoundCloud, for example, people can share it to the world. And I found quite a few bands from different kinds of self-publishing sites, all kinds of things, from black metal to electronic doom to folk punk. Because if you want to make a folk punk album, if you take the bare necessities, what you need, and let's say that you want to work with a computer, basically you only need one USB microphone. That's all you need. Back in the old days it wasn't that simple, but now when technology has moved forward enough, people can make, and people are making, albums in their bedrooms, in their rehearsal spaces. Heck, you can even make an album or an EP or whatever with your phone or with a tablet. So there's more things out there, and that also creates a problem. How can you get noticed if you want to get noticed? Because there are so many people putting out their music. And well, for example, what YouTube, if you are a filmmaker, you make short films, for example, YouTube is a good platform for it, although there are also other platforms, and some people have moved to those. For example, something like, was it BitChute is one of those, since YouTube is going somewhere, but that somewhere is not all that necessarily a good thing what comes to these changes during the last few years. But there are still sites where people can upload their music, their photos, their short films, music videos, whatever. So, and it reminds me of the days when blogging was the thing, not vlogging, but blogging. Everybody had a blog, or most females I knew, well, let's say a large portion of the females that I knew at one point had a blog, or they were kind of a co-writer, co-producer of a blog. So it's kind of a natural evolution with technology that you can try things. And if you want to make music but you're not sure if you really want to do it, well, it's cheap to try. You most likely have a laptop or a desktop or even your phone. You can try to make music. And if you like it, you can do it more. Same thing with photography. I mean, there are a lot of cheap digital cameras. If you want to try photography as a kind of a semi-serious hobby, you don't have to spend a fortune to buy a good quality camera. I mean, I remember when I started studying photography, it was in the late 1999-2000, between there. I bought a cheap, very cheap camera, and it cost a fortune. Obviously it was a film camera, it wasn't a digital camera. Digital cameras were already around. I mean, big boy digital cameras were already around, but the quality wasn't, or the quality of the cells on those cameras wasn't all that great back then. But Photoshop was already a thing, that I remember. And we used one of the early versions of Photoshop, or we had the opportunity. I only took a kind of a quick testing the waters thing with it because I wanted to keep shooting with film. But nowadays you can't really do that, so that's why I don't have a camera. I mean, this is the best camera I have what comes to taking pictures. This is the best dedicated camera I own, and this is a 6-year-old, if I remember correctly, something like 6 or 7 years old handheld camera. So every once in a while I've been thinking about it, getting a big boy camera, but I just can't justify it, because for what? I would be using it for a while and then it would just sat in its case because of I think it's time to go home. Today was the first day, or actually first evening, first early night, whatever you want to call this. I think it's still evening, when long johns were kind of mandatory. Some might say that I'm a pussy. Well, I like to keep my balls warm, so yay, because the breathing is already fogging off. So I think it's time for me to go home, try to do something. So until next time, see ya.